president comes in here, he's going to want to make a statement. He is going to want to look like he's in charge. He's been watching Joe Biden go out there and make these sort of statesman-like statements over the last couple of days. And the president wants, I think, to reclaim the mantle, reclaim the Oval Office to some extent here. And we'll wait and see if the president wants to take any questions. There's obviously a lot on our minds in terms of what we want to ask the president, such as, for example, why not continue to count the votes? That's what we do in this country. And so we'll have to see what the president has to say about that. Yeah, okay. I think so, yes, Andrew. They do not have a consistent position. They want to continue counting in states where perhaps he might be, he got a win, and they want to stop counting in states where he's in trouble. And that, you know, I think most Americans would look at that and just see that as being something that just doesn't stand up. And, you know, but the president is watching the lights go out on his presidency right now. That is what we're witnessing in real time. As these votes are being tabulated and Joe Biden is catching up in Pennsylvania.
It feels like a long time since we've been here.
The presidency of Donald J. Trump is vanishing before our eyes. And there are limited options left in this campaign, limited options left in this president. We haven't seen a one-term president in some 28 years. George H.W. Bush, when he lost presidency to Bill Clinton, went out gracefully, became friends with Bill Clinton, was that sort of a father-son relationship. If he is not going to go down without a fight,
then what's the plan from there?
You know, that is what we're hearing from Trump campaign advisors. He is going to fight this out with the end game is to win the presidency, and he's going to do it by hook or by crook. If that means flooding lawyers in the states all over the country and dragging them out, like Florida on steroids, that's what they're going to do. Now, I suspect, Anderson, if we watch these votes get tabulated over the next several days, and it looks like a Biden blowout, that may limit the president's options politically.
There are a lot of other
And we may have Republicans like Mitch McConnell and so on tapping him on the shoulder and saying, that's it, jig is up, time to go. But at this point, the president still has options. The networks have not declared things for Joe Biden. They want to stop that freight train from coming into the station, and I suspect that is going to be the mindset of the president.
Questions or Joe Biden did, he's simply going to come down and make a statement, and then go back to the Oval Office of the residents, but we should find out sometime in the next few minutes.
Yeah.
They are still talking about this. I talked to a couple of advisors who acknowledge that, you know, this is, Wisconsin is not going to work out that margin.
I expect that they're going to read some sort of a
standard sort of varies state by state. Strategy varies state by state. There were talks,
stick around
talk of stopping the votes in Michigan. Joe Biden's way in Michigan. That doesn't work. And so they are, I think, reacting minute by minute, as we are reacting minute by minute, to what is a Biden presidency that is starting to come into shape, that is starting to come into the picture. And the president, I suspect, is very frustrated about this. You know, tweets, some in all caps, some in
Come on.
false and misleading. And the president, he hates that. He wants to get around that. Coming out to the podium and having us take this on live television gives him a way of getting around those types of restrictions. And so I suppose, in addition to the presidential seal being slapped on that lectern behind me, there probably ought to be a Surgeon General. What you're about to hear from the President of the United States may not be in line with the facts, may be hazardous to your democracy, may be hazardous to the counting of the votes. I suspect that when the President comes out here, we're going to see a fair amount of bending of the truth. I just think we just all have to be prepared for that. You know, we can tiptoe the reality and dance around the truth here. We're going to say what we've seen over the last 4 years. This President will lie and lie and lie.
Struck 17 down in Wisconsin.
I suspect
I'm not sure what world that when it goes out. But that could potentially send a signal to voters that it's a lost cause.
Okay, great.
I'm telling you, I think that notion was
Right, okay.
ridden by the enthusiasm
Right.
that the president generated on the campaign trail. I was at a rally in the closing days in Green Bay. There were thousands of people who were out there, and the weather was cold, the weather was wintry, and they were still there. There were thousands of people in Omaha, Nebraska. There were thousands of people in Kenosha, Traverse City, Rochester, Minnesota. They limited it to 250 in the actual event, but there were thousands of people who were waiting outside just to show their support. So I'm not sure that this idea of suppression polls actually worked in the real world, but the president's got a case. I truly believe that the polling was so horribly inaccurate for the most part as it was in 2016. And I've said it to people on the campaign, talked to people on the campaign trail about this. And pollsters still have not figured out for the most part how to accurately read Trump voters. And well, they've had, unless he loses and runs again in 2024, they have a bigger chance to really figure it out. Two runners, Yeah, well, I think that he's been waiting for something significant to happen, such as, if Arizona were to go his way, or if Nevada were to go his way. But I think you saw Joe Biden come out for the second time today. Yesterday, he allowed Joe Biden to have the news cycle because his campaign surrogates were out there. They were really sort of leading the charge for the president in terms of where this was going to go. As far as the vote count goes, as far as the lawsuits go. But I think when Biden came, I was told yesterday, Biden came out, the president would probably come out. He didn't. So when Biden came out again today, I think the president said, let's go out. I got to get in front of the cameras.
Yes, I'm very thankful that you're there. Okay, I mean, I was prepared to do it myself, but this is a lot better. I did send you 2 test pictures.
Yeah, and don't forget, as these races tighten, he may have a little opportunity in the next few hours to come out
Okay,
and say
so we are good to go. We have not, we're told we're going to get 2.
We're all paying attention to Pennsylvania and a lot of attention on Arizona and Nevada. But if he loses
Okay,
Georgia,
so I'll be following away.
that's unrecoverable. And when's
Okay,
the last
thank
time
you.
Georgia went
Bye.
Democratic? 1992 with Bill Clinton. So the fact that the margin is so close to Georgia is extraordinary. I lived there for 5-6 years. And the fact I saw the tone and tenor of the demographic makeup and the politics of the state beginning to change. But for a Republican president to lose Georgia. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
I love you. I'll be home as soon as I can. Fantastic. How about you? stuff all the time. It's like, she parks in one of these spots and it's like 8 o'clock or. Corner of Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Oh, yes, go see. Then my wife wanted a card. It's gonna work.
Oh, yeah.
I'll
She
try
might be
to-
sleeping on the couch.
Yeah, she's okay. Yeah. I will text her.
Yeah. I'd stay on the far edge.
I've played it 100 times. Fox finally came out. So did I.
Because we're late, huh?
I think so.
What?
So we were just talking about that. That's never happened.
I have Pilates at 7:30. I don't know if they know that.
Was it?
I have Pilates at 7:30. I don't know if they know that.
Okay, so I gotta be honest.
I need Pilates.
They got me pushing through. That's the sad thing about the way life is right now. We don't have plans to go anywhere.
Yeah, no, no.
It was very good.
Sounds that very good.
Yes. It's on? Answer.
So they get back. Was it like?
You're closer.
Fine. Thank you.
Can we get you close?
No.
How are you?
They said they will give a 2-minute warning.
That's not a telephone. Actually, that is a warrant. Why do you think I'm here? Okay, why do you think I got that?
I know where you got that.
Well, we're gonna be here.
You already gave me COVID. Just give me free.
People wonder why I drink.
Sorry, I spent the last month with you 8 feet away from you.
Yeah, we don't both have COVID now?
I'm getting it.
I don't know what that.
You got it.
Yeah, you got, you and,
Robert's got the vaccine.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say,
Stand in line
you
with
and
him.
Robert.
are not allowed in the briefing.
2-minute warning, guys. 2-minute warning. 2-minute warning.
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna need it. It will have a phone.
Down in front.
Here we go. What we're made for. That is very loud. What was that? Somebody dropped something? I don't know.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good evening. I'd like to provide the American people with an update on our efforts to protect the integrity of our very important 2020 election. If you count the legal votes, I easily win. If you count the illegal votes, they can try to steal the election from us. If you count the votes that came in late, we're looking at them very strongly, but a lot of votes came in late. I've already decisively won many critical states, including massive victories in Florida, Iowa, Indiana, Ohio. To name just a few, we won these and many other victories despite historic election interference from big media, big money, and big tech. As everybody saw, we won by historic numbers. And the pollsters got it knowingly wrong. They got it knowingly wrong. We had polls that were so ridiculous, and everybody knew it at the time. There was no blue wave that they predicted. They thought there was going to be a big blue wave. That was false. That was done for suppression reasons. But instead, there was a big red wave, and it's been properly acknowledged, actually, by the media. They were, I think, very impressed, but that was after the fact. That doesn't do us any good. We kept the Senate despite having twice as many seats to defend as Democrats, and in a really much more competitive states, we did a fantastic job with the Senate. I think we're very proud of what's happened there. We had many more seats to defend. They spent almost $200 million on Senate races in South Carolina and Kentucky alone, 2 races, and hundreds of millions of dollars overall against us. At the national level, our opponents' major donors were Wall Street bankers and special interests. Our major donors were police officers, farmers, everyday citizens. Yet for the first time ever, we lost 0 races in the House. I was talking to Kevin McCarthy today. He said he couldn't believe it. 0 races, very unusual thing, 0. And actually won many new seats with, I think, many more on the way. This was also the year of the Republican woman. More Republican women were elected to Congress than ever before. That's a great achievement. I won the largest share of non-white voters of any Republican in 60 years, including historic numbers of Latino, African American, Asian American, and Native American voters, the largest ever in our history. We grew our party by 4 million voters, the greatest turnout in Republican Party history. Democrats are the party of the big donors, the big media, the big tech, it seems, and Republicans have become the party of the American worker, and that's what's happened. And we're also, I believe, the party of inclusion. As everyone now recognizes, media polling was election interference in the truest sense of that word, by powerful special interests. These really phony polls, I have to call them phony polls, fake polls, were designed to keep our voters at home, create the illusion of momentum for Mr. Biden, and diminish Republicans' ability to raise funds. They were what's called suppression polls. Everyone knows that now. And it's never been used to the extent that it's been used on this last election. To highlight just a few examples, the day before election, Quinnipiac, which was wrong on every occasion that I know of, had Joe Biden up by 5 points in Florida, and they were off by 8.4 points, and I won Florida easily. So they had me losing Florida by a lot, and I ended up winning Florida by a lot. Other than that, they were very accurate. They had him up 4 points in Ohio, and they were up by 12.2 points. And I also won Ohio, great state of Ohio, very easily. The Washington Post said Biden up 17 points in Wisconsin, and it was basically even. They were off by about 17 points. And they knew that. They're not stupid people. They knew that. Suppression. There are now only a few states yet to be decided in the presidential race. The voting apparatus of those states are run in all cases by Democrats. We were winning in all the key locations by a lot, actually. And then our numbers started miraculously getting whittled away in secret. And they wouldn't allow legally permissible observers. We went to court in a couple of instances, and we were able to get the observers put in. And when the observers got there, they wanted them 60, 70 feet away, 80 feet, 100 feet away, or outside the building.
The president talking about observers at the polling sites where they're now counting the ballots across this country. They have been there, Republicans and Democrats. What he's talking about is the requirement that there be some sort of distance because of the pandemic for those poll watchers. They have allowed them now to come closer, but those poll watchers, both Democrats and Republicans, were both represented in these locations around the country already. There's a lot to unpack here and a lot to fact check in real time, and this is really important because the stakes are so high in this presidential election, and people feel very strongly on both sides of this. So I want to bring in our chief White House correspondent, Jonathan Karl. And John, you and I were both
and then they seem to be able to find them. They wait, and then they find them. And you see that on election night. We were ahead in vote in North Carolina by a lot, tremendous number of votes. And we're still ahead by a lot, but not as many, because they're finding ballots all of a sudden. Oh, we have some mail-in ballots. It's amazing how those mail-in ballots are so one-sided, too. I know that it's supposed to be to the advantage of the Democrats, but in all cases, they're so one-sided. We were up by nearly 700,000 votes in Pennsylvania. I won Pennsylvania by a lot, and that gets whittled down to, I think they said now we're up by 90,000 votes, and they'll keep coming and coming and coming. They find them all over, and they don't want us to have any observers, although we won a court case. The judge said you have to have observers. Likewise in Georgia, and they're appealing. Actually, they're appealing. We won a case that we want people to watch, and we want observers, and they're actually appealing, which is sort of interesting. I wonder why they'd appeal, that all we want to do is have people watch as they do the vote tabulations. Likewise in Georgia, I won by a lot, with a lead of over getting close to 300,000 votes on election night in Georgia. And by the way, got whittled down, and now it's getting to be to a point where I'll go from winning by a lot to perhaps being even down a little bit. In Georgia, a pipe burst in a faraway location, totally unrelated to the location of what was happening, and they stopped counting for 4 hours, and a lot of things happened. The election apparatus in Georgia is run by Democrats. We also had margins of 300,000. In Michigan, we're way up in Michigan, won the state. And in Wisconsin, we did likewise fantastically well. And that got whittled down. In every case, they got whittled down. Today, we're on track to win Arizona. We only need to carry, I guess, 55% of the remaining vote, 55% margins. And That's a margin that we've significantly exceeded, so we'll see what happens with that, but we're on track to do okay in Arizona. Our goal is to defend the integrity of the election. We'll not allow the corruption to steal such an important election, or any election for that matter. And we can't allow anybody to silence our voters and manufacture results. I've been doing a lot of public things for a long time. I've never had anything that's been as inspirational, by people calling, talking, sending things to us. I've never seen such love and such affection and such spirit as I've seen for this. People know what's happening, and they see what's happening, and it's before their eyes. And there are many instances which will be reported very shortly. There's tremendous litigation going on, and this is a case where they're trying to steal an election. They're trying to rig an election, and we can't let that happen. Detroit and Philadelphia, known as two of the most corrupt political places anywhere in our country, easily cannot be responsible for engineering the outcome of a presidential race, a very important presidential race. In Pennsylvania, Democrats have gone to the state Supreme Court to try and ban our election observers, and very strongly. Now, we won the case, but they're going forward. They don't want anybody in there. They don't want anybody watching them as they count the ballots. And I can't imagine why. There's absolutely no legitimate reason why they would not want to have people watching this process, because if it's straight, they should be proud of it. Instead, they're trying, obviously, to commit fraud. There's no question about that. In Philadelphia, observers have been kept far away, very far away, so far that people are using binoculars to try and see, and there's been tremendous problems caused. They put paper on all of the windows so you can't see in, and the people that are banned are very unhappy and become somewhat violent. The 11th Circuit ruled that in Georgia, the votes have been in by Election Day, that they should be in by Election Day, and they weren't. Votes are coming in after Election Day. And they had a ruling already that you have to have the votes in by Election Day. To the best of my knowledge, votes should be in by Election Day. And they didn't do that. Democrat officials never believed they could win this election, honestly. I really believe that. That's why they did the mail-in ballots, where there's tremendous corruption and fraud going on. That's why they mailed out tens of millions of unsolicited ballots without any verification measures whatsoever. And I've told everybody that these things would happen, because I've seen it happen. I watched a lot of different elections before they decided to go with this big, massive election with tens of millions of ballots going out to everybody, in many cases totally unsolicited. This was unprecedented in American history. This was by design, despite years of claiming to care about the election security. They refused to include any requirement to verify signatures, identities, or even determine whether they're eligible or ineligible to vote. People are walking in there. They have no idea. They're just taking numbers. They're writing down things, the workers, and doing a lot of bad things. And we have a lot of information coming and litigation that you'll see that will shake even you people up. And you've seen it all. The officials overseeing the counting in Pennsylvania and other key states are all part of a corrupt Democrat machine that you've written about, and for a long time you've been writing about the corrupt Democrat machine. I went to school there, and I know a lot about it. It hasn't changed. It's a long time ago, and hasn't changed. It's gotten worse. In Pennsylvania, partisan Democrats have allowed ballots in the state to be received 3 days after the election, and we think much more than that. And they're counting those without even postmarks or any identification whatsoever. So you don't have postmarks, you don't have identification. There have been a number of disturbing irregularities across the nation. Our campaign has been denied access to observe any counting in Detroit. Detroit is another place, and I wouldn't say it has the best reputation for election integrity. Poll workers in Michigan were duplicating ballots, But when our observers attempted to challenge the activity, those poll workers jumped in front of the volunteers to block their view so that they couldn't see what they were doing. And it became a little bit dangerous. One major hub for counting ballots in Detroit covered up the windows again with large pieces of cardboard. And so they wanted to protect and block the counting area. They didn't want anybody seeing the counting, even though these were observers who were legal observers that were supposed to be there. In Detroit, there were hours of unexplained delay in delivering many of the votes for counting. The final batch did not arrive until 4 in the morning, and even though the polls closed at 8 o'clock, so they brought it in, and the batches came in, and nobody knew where they came from. We've also been denied access to observe in critical places in Georgia. In multiple swing states, counting was halted for hours and hours on election night, with results withheld from major Democrat-run locations only to appear later. And they suddenly appeared, and they all had the name Biden on them, or just about all, I think almost all. They all had the name Biden on them, which is a little strange. I challenge Joe and every Democrat to clarify that they only want legal votes, because they talk about votes, and I think they should use the word legal votes. We want every legal vote counted, and I want every legal vote counted. We want openness and transparency, no secret count rooms, no mystery ballots, no illegal votes being cast after Election Day. You have Election Day, and the laws are very strong on that. You have an Election Day, and they don't want votes cast after Election Day, and they want the process to be an honest one. It's so important. We want an honest election, and we want an honest count, and we want honest people working back there, because it's a very important job. So that's the way this country is going to win. That's the way the United States will win, and we think we will win the election very easily. We think there's going to be a lot of litigation because we have so much evidence, so much proof, and it's going to end up perhaps at the highest court in the land. We'll see. But we think there'll be a lot of litigation because we can't have an election stolen like this. And I tell you, I have been talking about this for many months with all of you, and I've said very strongly that mail-in ballots are going to end up being a disaster. Small elections were a disaster. Small, very easy-to-handle elections were disastrous. This is a large-scale version, and it's getting worse and worse every day. We're hearing stories that are horror stories, absolute horror stories. And we can't let that happen to the United States of America. It's not a question of who wins, Republican, Democrat, Joe, myself. We can't let that happen to our country. We can't be disgraced by having something like this happen. So it will be hopefully cleared up, maybe soon, I hope soon, but it'll probably go through a process, a legal process. And as you know, I've claimed certain states, and he's claiming states, and we can both claim the states, but ultimately I have a feeling judges are going to have to rule. But there's been a lot of shenanigans, and we can't stand for that in our country. Thank you very much.
Are you being a sore loser?
Why is the president undercutting this process?
Haley, are you here as press secretary or Trump advisor?